I never imagined my life would take such a strange turn. Most days, it felt like I was just drifting, floating from shift to shift, paycheck to paycheck. My name's Madison Reyes, 41 years old, divorced, with a daughter who thinks I'm stuck in the Stone Age because I still use Facebook. I've been a housekeeper for over 2 decades, and until recently, I thought I'd seen it all. Rich folks are rich folks. They spill champagne on silk rugs, let their purebred dogs ruin leather couches, and toss $100 candles after one use. You learn not to ask questions. You clean, nod, and disappear. I worked part-time for a private housekeeping agency out of New Jersey. They'd assign me to clients all across the tri-state area, but one address always stood out, 23 Sycamore Hill. The big iron gates, the winding driveway, the kind of mansion that made you feel like you were walking into a Netflix series. But it wasn't the house that haunted me. It was the man inside it, Julian Ashcroft. Julian was different. A billionaire tech mogul, widowed, and semi-retired after selling his company to some conglomerate for billions. But he wasn't flashy. No parties, no entourage, no women coming and going. Just him, the house, and a schedule so precise you could set your watch by it. Mondays were for mail, Tuesdays he sat by the koi pond, Wednesdays he walked the grounds with a glass of scotch. He never spoke much to me. In fact, for the first 3 months I worked there, he barely looked at me. That changed one Thursday afternoon. I was dusting the grand piano in the music room, a Steinway, probably worth more than my yearly salary, when I felt his eyes on me. Julian stood at the doorway, arms crossed, eyes unreadable. "You always hum when you clean," he said. I froze halfway through my off-key rendition of Fleetwood Mac. "Sorry, sir. Habit. I can stop." He shrugged. "Don't. Reminds me the house isn't completely dead." And just like that, something shifted. Over the next few weeks, he started noticing things. He'd comment on my humming, ask questions about my daughter Ava, even offer me tea some afternoons. Still, he was guarded. There was a heaviness to him, like he was always somewhere else in his mind. I assumed it was grief. His wife, Eleanor, had died 5 years ago, and from the few photos around the house, she'd been stunning. Graceful. Everything I wasn't. But then little things started happening that I couldn't explain. One morning, I came in to find fresh groceries already stocked in the fridge, all brands I usually bought for myself, right down to Ava's favorite cereal. The agency never did that. Another time, I left my jacket behind, and when I returned the next day, it was hanging on a vintage coat rack near the main entrance. Polished. Pressed. That coat had a hole in the sleeve and smelled like mop water. It had no business being on display in a mansion like that. I figured maybe one of the other staff did it, but when I asked around, they looked confused. Because apparently there were no other staff. Julian lived completely alone. One Friday in mid-October, I arrived to find the gates already open, something that never happened. The mansion was unusually quiet, even for Julian's standards. I called out, got no answer. I started cleaning, trying to shake the sense that something was off. Then I found the envelope. It was sitting on the edge of the grand piano. Cream-colored, thick paper. My name handwritten in perfect cursive. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "If something happens to me, Madison, trust no one. Not even the lawyers. Especially not the lawyers." I read it twice. 3 times. My hands started shaking. By the time I made it to the library to find him, Julian was gone. No note. No staff. No Julian. Just the empty chair by the fireplace and the faint smell of scotch in the air. The next day, the news broke. Julian Ashcroft was dead. Heart failure, the paper said. Peaceful. Dignified. The obituary ran with a black and white photo of him and Eleanor. A love story turned tragedy. But something didn't sit right with me. He was only 58. Fit. Sharp. And he left me a note like that? I didn't go to the funeral. I wasn't invited. I doubt anyone even knew I existed. But the real shock came a week later. I was mopping the kitchen floor in another client's penthouse when I got the call. A woman named Camille Hartford, sounding like she swallowed a thesaurus and a wine bottle, told me she was the executor of Julian Ashcroft's estate. "You'll want to sit down, Miss Reyes," she said. "Mr. Ashcroft left you something in his will." The line went silent. And just like that, my ordinary life was over. If you've ever had a moment where reality feels like it slipped sideways, like the world is spinning but you're the only one standing still, well, that was me in the back hallway of a Manhattan penthouse, gripping my mop like it was a lifeline. While some lady with a trust fund accent told me a dead billionaire had left me something in his will. I didn't say anything at first. Couldn't. My brain was trying to play catch-up with words like estate and executor and left you something. Madison? Camille Hartford's voice came again, clipped and impatient, like she was used to people jumping when she snapped. Did you hear me? Yes, I croaked. What exactly did he leave me? A pause. I could hear paper shuffling. A sigh. Unfortunately, I can't disclose that over the phone. Mr. Ashcroft's will specify a private reading. We'll send a car. Tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. sharp. Before I could protest, the line went dead. The rest of my shift passed in a blur. I spilled bleach on a rug and didn't even care. My supervisor yelled at me about streaks on a mirror. I nodded blankly. What do you say when your world decides to crack open just wide enough to show you a secret door? The car that picked me up the next morning was a sleek black town car, the kind I usually saw whisking hedge fund guys into Midtown. The driver didn't speak, just nodded as he opened the door. I kept waiting for someone to jump out and yell gotcha, but no one did. We drove back to Sycamore Hill. I hadn't been back since the day I found the note. The gates opened automatically this time, like they were expecting me. The mansion looked exactly the same, which somehow made everything feel even stranger. Inside, the house smelled like lemon polish and old books. Camille Hartford stood in the sitting room, dressed in a blazer that probably cost more than my rent. She didn't smile. This way. She led me into Julian's library. The curtains were drawn. A fireplace crackled low, like someone had tried to make it cozy but failed. 3 other people sat in stiff-backed chairs. A man in a suit, maybe mid-40s, with a face like a hawk. A younger woman, blonde, wearing sunglasses indoors. And an older woman with pearl earrings and a permanent scowl. Madison Reyes, Camille announced, like she was presenting me at a royal court. This is Richard Vale, Julian's corporate attorney. Veronica Ashcroft Coleman, his cousin. And Genevieve Ashcroft, his mother. His mother? Genevieve's eyes raked over me like I was gum stuck to her shoe. The help? Really, Camille? What's next, the gardener? Julian's instructions were specific, Camille said coolly, pulling a thick folder from her briefcase. Now shall we begin? The reading took nearly 2 hours. Most of it was the usual billionaire stuff. Charities, trusts, company shares, art donations. Richard got something called a consulting retainer. Veronica received a vineyard in Napa. Genevieve, to her visible fury, was given a personal token of appreciation in the form of a vintage Rolls-Royce she loathed. Then Camille pulled out a separate envelope. She opened it slowly like it was something sacred. Cleared her throat. To Madison Reyes, she began, for her honesty, consistency, and the rare gift of making a broken place feel warm again, I leave the house at Sycamore Hill, and all its contents in entirety. Silence. For a moment, no one breathed. Then Genevieve stood up so fast her chair screeched. That is absurd. She's a cleaner. A maid. Veronica's sunglasses slid down her nose. Are we being pranked? Is this some elaborate joke Julian cooked up before dying? I sat frozen. I couldn't feel my hands. Couldn't blink. There must be a mistake, I said. I cleaned his house. I mopped floors. And yet, Camille said, folding the paper neatly, you're now the legal owner of this property. Julian's wishes are very clear. Richard Vale spoke then. His voice was sharp. There are contingencies, of course. Conditions. Camille nodded. Yes. Madison must live in the house for 90 consecutive days, starting immediately. During that time, she may not sell, rent, or otherwise transfer the property. Live here. I repeated. I have a kid. A daughter. She goes to school. You'll find Mr. Ashcroft accounted for that as well, Camille said. Private transport, school tuition. Everything's covered. Veronica let out a low laugh. Oh, this is delicious. Wait until the board hears about this. Genevieve's eyes were daggers. She'll never last. Camille looked at me. Do you accept the terms, Miss Reyes? I didn't know what to say. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely hear my own thoughts. But Ava's face flashed through my mind. Our tiny apartment. The stack of overdue bills. The way she'd asked last week if I could afford dance classes again. I swallowed. Yes. I accept. Camille gave a tight nod. Then the house is yours. What I didn't know then was that accepting the house meant stepping into a world full of secrets, surveillance, and a legacy far darker than I ever could have imagined. Because Julian Ashcroft didn't just leave me a mansion. He left me a mystery. I didn't sleep that first night at Sycamore Hill. Ava stayed with my sister at least until we figured out the logistics of school and the new commute, but I couldn't sleep. The house was too quiet, too big, too aware of my every footstep like it was holding its breath. I wandered through the halls barefoot, unsure whether I was allowed to open certain doors even though the place now technically belonged to me. I didn't feel like the owner of anything. I felt like an intruder. At some point around 2 a.m., I ended up in the old music room. The Steinway was still there. Covered. Untouched. The air in the room felt different, heavier. I didn't hum. I just sat there and stared at the keys. And that's when I heard it. A click. Then a low mechanical whir. Followed by a soft thud. Like a door closing. I froze. The sound had come from behind the bookshelf. I walked over, heart hammering. The bookshelf was built into the wall. Ornate. Solid oak. But on closer inspection, I noticed something, the tiniest of seams, like a panel had moved. I pressed it lightly. It clicked open like something out of a spy movie. Behind the shelf was a narrow, hidden staircase. No lights. No dust. It had been used recently. I stood there, paralyzed between curiosity and fear. I should have called someone. A lawyer. The police. Camille even. But something about the staircase didn't feel like danger. It felt like invitation. I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and took a step inside. The stairs led down into a hidden part of the basement I never knew existed. Cooler down there. Damp. The walls were lined with file cabinets. Industrial. Like something from a government archive. On the far wall there was a single metal door. A keypad lock. Fingerprint scanner. I stared at it like it might suddenly explain itself. Of course it didn't. The next morning I asked Camille about it. She blinked slowly. There's no sub-basement in the blueprints. I showed her the photos. Her expression didn't change, but her knuckles whitened around her coffee cup. I'll look into it, she said. But Madison, please don't go down there again until we're sure it's safe. I nodded. But I didn't mean it. Over the next few days, strange things started happening. Lights flickering. Doors unlocked that I'd locked. A letter appeared on the kitchen counter, an old one, dated 2 years ago, addressed to Eleanor Ashcroft, Julian's late wife. But the envelope had my name on it. Inside, a birthday card. Happy birthday, M. You always made this place brighter. J. My birthday wasn't for another 3 weeks. I called Camille again. She said no one else had access to the house. I started to think maybe I was losing it. Maybe grief could reach you secondhand, maybe Julian's death was messing with my mind. Then Ava moved in. And the weirdness turned real. The first night she stayed over, she asked me who the man in the hallway was. What man? I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. She pointed toward the upstairs corridor. Tall. Glasses. Looked like he was waiting. I ran upstairs. No one. No sign of anyone. But a cold breeze crept along the floor and a book had fallen from one of the hallway tables. It was Eleanor's journal. I never knew it existed. And inside was a name I'd never heard before, the Orpheus Group. I took the journal into my room and read it front to back that night. Most of it was innocuous, gardening notes, guest lists, references to dinners with names I didn't recognize. But that phrase came up again and again, the Orpheus Group. Usually in half-thoughts. Julian met with them again. He won't talk about it. They warned him not to trust his board. Orpheus offered protection, but from what? I googled the name. Got nothing. A few mythological references. One defunct jazz band. No organization. No address. But one thing was clear. Julian Ashcroft had been afraid. Not just of death. Of something else. And now I was living in the house he built to hide from it. It started with a name, the Orpheus Group, and a locked door, but by the time I found myself pacing the hallway outside Julian's old study, barefoot again, clutching Eleanor's cracked leather journal to my chest as though it might breathe if I held it tightly enough, I'd begun to understand that nothing in Sycamore Hill was as it seemed, not the silence, not the warmth, not the nostalgia etched into the molding, and certainly not the man who had left it to me in the first place. The days bled into each other in a strange, unbroken rhythm, the kind of time you only experience after a death or a birth, where everything is technically normal, but you can't stop feeling like the world forgot to update your software. And during those blurred days, Ava's laughter echoed in the halls like it belonged there, like she'd never known anything else, which made it worse because I couldn't tell her what I was seeing, what I was beginning to suspect. How do you tell your daughter, who just made friends with a girl named Layla and started drawing flowers on her bedroom window with dry erase markers, that the house she's growing to love might be hiding something more than dust and secrets, might be alive in ways we didn't want to imagine? It happened the following Wednesday, a day that started like every other since we moved in, too early, too quiet, too perfect, and ended with me standing in front of the mirror in Julian's ensuite bathroom, watching my own breath fog the glass even though the heating system was on and the air was warm and there was no logical reason for visible condensation except, perhaps, the deeply illogical presence of something watching, always watching. I had begun keeping notes, small scribbles in the back of Eleanor's journal, because starting a new one felt too exposed, too separate, and they included everything. The coffee pot that brewed itself at 4:17 a.m. 3 days in a row. The creak of the third stair at night even when no one walked on it. Ava talking in her sleep in voices that were not her own, and the latest, the one I still haven't written down, the faint clicking sound of a projector coming from the study that, according to blueprints Camille had sent me, didn't have any electrical wiring or outlets at all. I tried, truly tried, to dismiss it, to tell myself the house was old, that grief made patterns where none existed, that Eleanor's handwriting had simply grown erratic toward the end and wasn't warning me but processing her own loss. But even as I said these things aloud in the bathroom mirror, testing the logic of each sentence like a teacher grading a nervous student, something in the corner of the mirror flickered, a shape that was not mine, a shadow that moved opposite of me, and I dropped the journal in the sink. The next morning I returned to the basement. This time, I brought gloves, a flashlight with fresh batteries, a portable power bank, and Ava's old baby monitor, because if I was going to go deeper, I needed something, to hear me if I didn't come back up. The hidden staircase behind the bookshelf welcomed me like an old friend. I didn't hesitate. I descended. The keypad by the steel door blinked red as always. I tried all the obvious codes, birthdays, 0000, even Ishcroft, nothing worked. I sat on the floor back against a filing cabinet, trying not to think about how cold it was. That's when I saw it. On the side of the cabinet, nearly invisible unless you were sitting just so, was a small metal dial. Old-fashioned. Almost like a safe. I turned it. The cabinet clicked open, revealing a single folder. Orpheus, Entry 3, unauthorized copy. Inside were photographs. Not crime scene photos, not at first, but snapshots, almost candid. One showed Julian standing beside a man I didn't recognize in front of a government building with no signage. Another showed Eleanor alive, vibrant, holding a briefcase and standing in what looked like a server room. The last photo was the one that made my hands go cold. It showed me. Taken from a distance, probably a year ago, outside Ava's school, waiting by my car. I was holding a grocery bag. Smiling. Ordinary. I felt my breath stop. Below the photo was a line of text. Subject, M. Reyes. Potential anchor. Status, active. Anchor? Anchor for what? The baby monitor on the floor crackled. Then a voice, faint, low, male, she's not ready. Not yet. I slammed the cabinet shut, shoved the folder into my tote, and ran. Camille didn't answer her phone. Again. And when I tried her office line, I was told she was traveling internationally on a secure client matter. I sat in the sunroom, Ava playing outside with Layla, watching the wind toy with the autumn leaves, clutching the folder to my chest like it was a lifeline I didn't ask for. Later that night, I opened the folder again. There was a second set of documents behind the photos, handwritten pages, notes maybe, or a journal of Julian's I'd never seen. Most of it was in shorthand, but the phrases I could decipher painted a picture far stranger than I ever could have prepared for. If Orpheus fails, the loop resets. Must hide the anchor. Eleanor suspects. She doesn't understand the cost. Madison can hold it. She's seen enough pain. She'll survive it. When the time comes, she'll inherit not just the house but the history. History? I stayed up all night deciphering every word I could, ignoring the way the walls seemed to pulse around me, like the house itself didn't want these words to be read, and by 4 a.m., I realized something chilling. The house wasn't just a home. It was a vessel. A memory trap. And I was the new gatekeeper. Which meant Julian hadn't given me a gift. He'd given me a burden. One I was never meant to understand. Until now. I thought the house had been quiet before, but after reading Julian's notes, those fragmented warnings etched in a shorthand that felt less like coding and more like confession, Sycamore Hill became something else entirely. It wasn't silence anymore. It was suspension. Like the house was waiting for me to act. Like something had been activated. Ava didn't notice it, or if she did, she didn't say. She was happy. So happy. Too happy. She and Layla played together constantly, and though I searched our neighbors' records and school logs, I could never find a last name or parent associated with Layla. Every time I asked Ava more than a passing question about her, the conversation shifted like fog slipping from my hands. She's just Layla, Mom. She lives close. Don't worry. But I did worry. Especially after the photo. It was in the folder Julian had left behind, buried, actually, beneath a set of folded schematics I'd missed the first time. Sycamore Hills blueprints dated 1987. The year Ava was born. Except Ava was born in 2011. The blueprint wasn't of the house. Not exactly. It was the house and something else. A schematic layered over another schematic, rooms that didn't exist layered atop the real ones. In the bottom right-hand corner in faded ink, or PHUS, Model V, Anchor Grid 6. Subject Reyes. I sat at the kitchen table until the sun came up, rereading that line, sipping cold coffee that tasted like rust. I kept thinking about the projector sound from Julian's study, the one I still hadn't found, and the way the lights flickered in rhythmic pulses late at night, exactly 13 pulses, always 13, and the smell that came and went from Ava's bedroom. Like old books and hospital antiseptic. Familiar and wrong. That morning I tried something I hadn't done before. I turned off the electricity to the entire house. Main breaker. Total blackout. And the lights stayed on. I stood in the basement, flashlight off, breaker thrown, wires exposed, and stared as the chandelier in the hallway above me shimmered to life, soft, golden light. Julian had called the house a vessel. But for what? The truth came in pieces like shrapnel. It started when I returned to the steel door in the hidden basement and found it ajar. The keypad was dark. No red light. Just an opening, narrow but enough. Enough to slide through. I went in. What I found wasn't a bunker. It wasn't a lab or a server room or even a vault, though it had elements of all three. It was unmistakably a theater. Rows of seats, maybe 30. A narrow aisle. A small dusty screen. And behind the screen, a room of servers humming low, their green and amber lights pulsing like a heartbeat. A console sat at the center blinking. Login, J. Ashcroft. I tried it. Password. On a whim, I typed, Elie 1946. The screen blinked. Access granted. Files appeared, video logs, transcripts, encrypted folders marked with names I didn't recognize. One of them was titled Anchor File Final. I opened it. It was a video. Julian sat at his desk, eyes red-rimmed, hands trembling. His voice was calm but frayed, like a man who's lived 3 lives too many. If you're seeing this, Madison, then either I succeeded and you're the only one left who can keep it stable, or I failed, and you're the last piece of a broken loop. I'm sorry. I never wanted this for you. I watched your life for years, not because I was spying. Because I was searching. For someone who could hold it. Contain it. The recursion. The memories. The time echo. He leaned forward. You think this house is haunted? No. It's haunted by us. Every version of us. Every time the loop resets, the echoes grow louder. You've seen them, haven't you? The doors that open. The voices. Ava talking in her sleep. She's remembering things she hasn't lived. Because she has lived them. We all have. And we're trapped. The screen went black. And then another voice. Eleanor. He told me not to look. But I looked. I always look. Madison, if you hear this, don't trust Camille. She works for Orpheus. They don't want to stop the loop. They want to study it. Exploit it. You're not their savior. You're their experiment. I turned the console off. And vomited into a trash bin in the corner. The next morning, Camille showed up. Unannounced. Dressed in gray. Tailored. Calm. We need to talk, she said. I didn't invite her in. She walked in anyway. She looked around like someone inspecting a warehouse she hadn't visited in a while. You're seeing them, aren't you? The cracks. The repeats. I said nothing. She placed a folder on the kitchen table. It was labeled Model 7 Anchor Termination Protocol. Don't open it, she said. Not yet. Just listen. I listened. She told me about the project, how Orpheus started as a temporal research initiative, how the house was the first anchor site, how Julian and Eleanor volunteered, how the recursion began unexpectedly, how it got stuck, and how anchors, people like me, could temporarily stabilize the loop. But they never last, she said, sipping my coffee like it was her own. They wear down. Fracture. Break. That's what happened to Eleanor. I asked her what they wanted from me. She smiled. We want to see how far you go before you break. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in Ava's room, watched her sleep, counted the freckles on her cheek, memorized the sound of her breathing, because I didn't know how many more nights I had left. In the hallway, the lights flickered 13 times. The projector whirred, and I began to remember things I'd never lived. Memories of Julian calling me Eleanor. Memories of Ava dying in my arms from a fire that never happened. Memories of Camille and me, laughing on a beach I've never been to. The loop wasn't just repeating. It was bleeding into me. In the moments between silence and sound, between what is real and what is remembered, Sycamore Hill no longer felt like a home or even a prison. It felt like a pulse, an ancient one, humming quietly beneath the wood grain of the floorboards, pushing against the seams of the house's reality like breath against glass. And I was its lung. That morning I didn't brush my teeth. I didn't check my phone. I walked barefoot into the library, placed Julian's folder on the mantel, and opened the envelope labeled Model 7, Anchor Termination Protocol. The paper inside was simple. 2 pages. One typed, one handwritten. The typed page listed a sequence of steps: isolation, memory anchor detachment, containment if destabilization occurs. The handwritten one was a note from Julian. Short, unsteady. If you read this, Madison, it means you're still intact. It means the recursion hasn't consumed you yet. But it will. You have one option left. A full reset. You know where. You know how. I didn't. Not really. But some part of me, the bleeding part, the echo inside, did. I didn't pack. Ava was still sleeping. I wrote her a note and left it on her nightstand. It simply read, "If I'm not back by sunset, follow the lights." The key was inside Eleanor's favorite book, pressed between 2 pages near the end. I found it weeks ago and assumed it was sentimental. It wasn't. It opened the door behind the theater screen. Behind it was a corridor. Narrow, silent, white-tiled. I walked it barefoot, carrying only the folded blueprint. At the end of the corridor was a room made of mirrored surfaces. In the center, a chair. Not a throne. Not a medical seat. Something between them. Suspended above it, pulsing faintly, was a sphere of soft white light. I stepped into the center. A voice spoke. Not a speaker. Not Camille. Not even Julian. My voice. Begin memory reclamation. Confirm sequence. I didn't know the sequence, but my mouth moved anyway. 23. Sycamore. Grid 6. Anchor Reyes. The sphere pulsed. The chair pulled me down gently, and I saw everything. I saw every version of me. 1,000 Madison Reyeses. Some who lived. Some who didn't. Some who ran. Some who surrendered. One who burned the house down. One who became Camille. I saw Julian across loops, mentor, monster, martyr. I saw Ava's eyes in every cycle, wide and terrified. I saw Layla. Not a friend, not a neighbor, but the echo of a child lost too early in the original loop. A projection built from grief. An echo made flesh. I saw Orpheus, not a corporation, not a lab, not anymore, but a will. An artificial memory clinging to temporal anchors, looping them endlessly to perfect its own survival. And I saw myself at the center. Not an experiment. Not a mistake. A choice. Because in one of the earliest loops, Eleanor had written one final line into her journal. One that Julian buried. One that Camille tried to erase. Only she can break it. The one who sees Ava as real. The reset was never about time. It was about love. I stood up. The room shimmered. The light sphere cracked. A siren, soft, muffled, bone deep, began to echo. I walked back through the corridor. Every mirrored surface now reflected a different version of me. Smiling. Bleeding. Dead. Whole. I walked past them all. When I emerged into the theater, the house was shaking. Camille was there. "Don't," she said. "You don't understand what you're doing." I picked up the blueprint from where I dropped it. Held it out to her. "I understand more than you think." She stepped forward. "If you reset, we lose everything." "You already did," I said. She lunged. I ran. The power surged. The lights flared. The projector sparked. Ava's voice called out somewhere upstairs. Camille screamed my name like it belonged to her. I reached the music room. The Steinway. The place where Julian first spoke to me. And I sang. Fleetwood Mac. Off-key. Loud. The walls shook. The piano hummed. The light cracked through the floorboards. I closed my eyes and let go. When I woke, the house was still. No hum. No pulses. No theater. No mirrored corridor. Just sunlight, fresh air, and the smell of real coffee from the kitchen. Ava was eating cereal. "Morning," she said. "You look like you didn't sleep." I sat across from her. I didn't ask about Layla. I didn't ask about loops. Because I already knew. She was free. And so was I.